And welcome back, everybody. I hope that you had a good break. You had a cup of coffee. Thanks, Louis. That music is great. Thanks for the introduction. And let's get rolling again. So our next speaker is going to give us something really, really, really special. You know, Facebook introduced us to the metaverse. And today we're going to see what that actually means. So as I introduce our next speaker, Harold Flashman, Harold is the MD of Fosh Learning. He's a qualified electrician and electronics engineer for energy appliances and an industrial engineer who has 20 years experience in the implementation of technology and engineering projects. He is an expert in technical vocational education, both here in South Africa and in Germany. Today, he has something extra special for us. We've heard about the metaverse, but what does it mean for project management? Because when we think about it, we think avatars and robots, but let's really get practical here. Instead of telling us, he's going to show us. So please join me in welcoming Harold Flashman to our virtual stage. Harold, over to you.
Thank you very much, Beth. Good morning to all participants. I'm extremely honored to be here today, I must say. I mean, alongside those great speakers, and I'm quite happy what I heard before from Sheila and from Dr. Oosthuizen. We were talking about critical thinking skills. We were talking about, you know, how was it adapted onto the floor level. This is exactly where we are operating on. So I'm basically a developer of learning material. I've done development in Germany, examination papers for quite a while. I came to South Africa in '95, fell in love with it, and used to work in a different industry, mainly in the automotive industry, renewable energy. And since a couple of years, now precisely I would say 5 to 6 years, I'm operating within the educational sphere in South Africa, working with the Department of Higher Education, with the Quality Council for Trades and Occupation, with NAM, the different associations. And when I started working there, I realized we were mentoring apprentices and looked at their performance, and then looked at what is actually happening when they finish with their trade, when they trade tested, when they qualified. We all know it's a big problem in South Africa to find a job, you know, to beat the informal market, specifically on some of the trades which we are working with. This is the electricians, plumbers, bricklayers, carpenters, and so on. So what we did, we looked into that, and then we thought, okay, where is actually the problem? And then we realized that a lot of it is very, very generic taught. So the context was missing. So we started very, very simple. So we basically, let me share my screen for that. What we did, we moved into, where is now my screen? Let me just say, okay. We moved into an informal environment where I have, I run a little orphanage in Winterfeld, and what I realized that there's a lot of non-compliance issues, specifically in the electrical field. So what we did, we kind of created a very small project for you. This is like project management 101, but we said, okay, look, there's a lady, she's got a problem, she feels the electrical installation is not good. So we then gave that information to a set of students, and we said, look, give her a quote, look at what is all not compliant, and you know, the client is there for you. What we did, we created very, very simple. This is 360-degree photos, nothing more, nothing less. We created a little bit of an overview. You could move into the house, you could walk around the house, and you could get certain information about whatever you feel is important for giving the client a real good, technically, economically correct quote. So this is basically how we started. We then, the company or the apprentices who gave us the best quote, they then got awarded the job. So basically what we did, it was a fully holistic 360-degree project. They went out, they did the project physically, and now all of a sudden everybody realized, oh, there is a big difference between what you learn generically, theoretically, and what you do on site. Every client is different, every situation is different. And so we then decided from here, let's go one step further. Let's now build our little virtual South African environment. If you look close, you can see here in the front, this is basically the same building which we have seen now with the 360-degree photos. This is now just, we digitized it using BIM technology. I mean, BIM, for you, I think it is, you all, or most of you should be familiar with it. It's a where we create and manage information for certain built assets. So if I can take you into that, you can see how detailed we basically built this. You can go into it. You can, for example, take walls out. You can then go a little bit closer. You can go more into detail. I just quickly take out the floor, because this gives you quite a very good idea on what can be done here, specifically in a learning and teaching environment. If you look at this now, if I'm now using this in teaching either students or lecturers, or for that matter, project managers, you know, who need to understand systemically how are things put together and why are they put together the way they are. So we can go in here, for example, and measure. You see the measure from the gully down to that. We could now discuss, you know, what does actually the standard say to that? Is this something which we need to take into consideration, and why and how is it done? So this is we call it, yeah, you can call it a metaverse. I'm going to go there a little bit later more into detail. But for now, I want to take you one step back. I want to go and say, look, we have currently a problem in one of those houses where I want to take you into. That house is fully automated, and I want to just hand over to my project manager, who is currently dealing with a small problem in one of those houses in the digital twin. And I hand over to Tristan.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I will be acting as a project manager on this issue. So we have a site where we have a client who's experiencing nuisance tripping issues. So I kind of just want to show how these building information modeling tools can be beneficial to us in actually collaborating and collating on this issue, especially with the parties involved on the site. So as you can see, please see my shared screen. We are currently in the building virtually, that is in this metaverse environment, and we can walk to the distribution board that is the specific issue. These tools allows us to then look at what was planned originally, the installation that was planned to be done, and we can actually isolate this specific installation and then collaborate with the parties involved that need to come out, either fix the issue or do the installation properly. So some of the advantages of using this is being able to store all of our data that is on site centrally and actually manage it and access it digitally online. So if we look at one of these circuit breakers, you can actually see that most of the information required to do the installation or to get guarantees, if there's a management need to be done, if something has failed, you can then afterwards go see exactly what the product code is, what the cost would be, what the ratings are, and this would assist everyone involved. If I click on here, we can also go to the actual project page of what this is. Everything will be linked. So I'm going to hand over to Dan, who is the the master electrician that is working on site, and he will be collaborating with the contractor on site who would need to fix this issue.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Good morning, everybody. As you can see, we've had a problem on site where building automation project has been completed. And you'll see the project is now basically almost done. But we've had a report from the client that he's experienced some nuisance tripping. So Tristan, if you can go to the model and just show us the specific circuit breaker that the customer was complaining about. I just want to have a look. That would be the second one from the right-hand side. Yes, that one over there. So the customer has been complaining that that circuit has been tripping. Now you'll see on, if you can pin Alan Munyai, he's currently our representative on site. Alan, can you just take a pointer and point to that specific circuit breaker? Let's just compare what we've planned, how the circuit was designed versus what was installed. That would be the second one from the right-hand side, Alan.
Okay, you mean this one?
Oh, okay. Can you just read what is the rating of that specific circuit breaker?
It's P16.
Okay, so it's a 16 amp circuit breaker. Tristan, can you just focus on what was planned? What did we have in mind for this specific circuit? Because the customer has got specific requests. He's got a test bench that's working on that specific circuit.
So our original planning was to have a 20 amp C-curve circuit breaker.
Oh, okay. So the problem that I currently am identifying here is that because some of the other circuit breakers were planned as 16 amp circuit breakers, it looks like the contractor actually installed the wrong circuit breaker there. There's actually a difference between what we planned and what was installed. Can you just confirm the conductor size there, Alan, on that specific circuit?
It's 2.5.
Tristan, I've previously sent you an excerpt from the National Wiring Code, the actual standard, the SABS standard. Can you just post that? I just want to make sure that we're following the correct.
All right, give me one
I just
second.
want to make sure that we're still compliant. Okay, so if we have a look, so we've got the overload protection in there as required by the standard, but yeah, the problem seems to be exactly what I thought it was. The circuit can go up to 20 amps, but it has actually only been installed up to a 16 amp. So that is what's causing the nuisance tripping. Okay, thank you very much for that, Tristan. If you can go back to the model, the rest of it seems to be installed as per project plan. So it is clear that the contractor had a little mishap there, and he just needs to replace on site the specific circuit breaker that's providing the overload protection to ensure that it complies with the BIM model as the planning was indicated previously. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a simulation, but you can see how we actually saved a lot of time, compared technical detail from the planning model towards what was actually installed on site. And the best part is not all of us had to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to site, spend half an hour or 45 minutes wasting time chatting this and that. There's actually one person on site, and yeah, that is the way we can use it. Harold, back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. So I think you get a drift on how we can use technology. I mean, how that a BIM model becomes very, very relevant, specifically in a high level or a more complex engineering environment. I mean, in this case, I'm the system integrator. I did the whole programming for that house. So if you can have access via the BIM model, even to the programming parameters, I mean, this is great. So I just want to take you now one step further. You looked at our bigger digital side, virtual side, and I want to just show you how we then use that more in assessing people or making people, giving people tasks which would normally be a little bit difficult to do that in, say, a college or a training environment. Let me go. I just need to share my screen and the sound. You should hear the client talking. I'm just gonna start it up. I'll find my mouse here. Okay.
Hi there. Thank you for coming out on such short notice. As I explained on the phone, I would like you to set up two-way switches for me. I want the light in the kitchen and the light in the living room to both be controlled by two-way switches. I also need you to install switches next to the back door and next to the bedroom door. Before you start with the work, please provide me with a quote. Thank you.
As you can see, our idea here is there is a client. You never know what the client knows. Sometimes he knows a lot, sometimes he knows nothing, sometimes he thinks he knows. So in this case, he just wants to have a two-way switching being installed. As you can see, if you took notice earlier, this is part of our virtual environment. What I can do now, I can physically go in, I can measure, I can already put certain things in my quote. I can say I need so much of that, I need so much of that. It most probably takes me 4 hours. I make some extra notes here. And when I'm okay with all of that, I would go back quickly to my car or into my office, where I then can create a small plan for my installation team. I can pull on the correct symbols. I can draw into that. I can write, for example, light. And when I'm happy with that, I would go and present that to my client. At this point, you can see my client is extremely happy. So that means my price is good. If I pull the price up, he becomes a little bit more not so happy. If I, for example, take my hours up, he becomes rather unhappy. And now he would even decline my quote. This gives me this gives the student obviously this learning curve. Number one, listening what the client says. Number two, looking into that specific environment. And number three, planning it optimally, and then also looking at his profit, because we are assessing the people according to whether it's done according to the client's request, whether it's correct, and whether he made money, because this is in the end what counts. Let us just quickly see. He accepts the quote. As from here, I go in, I can physically do the installation and pull wires, you know, do measurements. Let me pull the wire. Let's just, maybe that's still good enough to give us that the light is on at least before my presentation is over. So let's try that. You see here, this is also a little bit different than what they normally would learn in college. This is what you in real life would see. You only see your lamp, you quickly connect it, you go here, you connect it. I obviously have a measuring instrument as well. I go to the plug. It's now not done according to his request, because he wanted a two-way switch for 2 lights. This is only a normal on and off. Let's quickly check it. Okay, the light is on, the light is off. But now already, if you look at my supplier list, I had to go once unplanned back to the store. It took me 300 Rand off. My profit is on 92 Rand 22. If I would have now done the whole installation, I would have ended up in a loss. So this is what we want to teach the students, the lecturers, so that when they come to site in one of your sites, they're going to be better prepared, be able to open their own businesses, to critical think, to do and plan what the client wants to do. Okay, that was my presentation. I think we are in time, Beth, isn't it? Yeah. 24 seconds. So I'm happy to engage with all of you. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Harold, thank you so much. German precision there for us. Thank you very much. Let's go into a time of Q&A. We already do have a couple of great questions, but I'd like to say thank you to Harold, to Tristan, and to Donnie for such a smooth demonstration. It kind of feels real. I don't know about you, but I think it works really well. Loretta, Belinda asked a very interesting question. Perhaps, would you like to maybe take that one? Loretta, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Bev. Melinda, the question is, how long does it take you to create a virtual house like this with all the details, to the circuit breakers details?
Well, obviously at the beginning when we started off, I mean, it was a trial and error. It took us rather long because, you know, when you come along, as what I heard earlier with Sheila, you know, when she said, you know, we haven't had the resources to go and have that been developed by an outside company. We did everything in-house. I did it a lot with young artisans who basically built themselves up into making use of 3D you know, software. So it took us a little bit longer, but as we build up a big database, it obviously takes, I mean, the time is shortened by, yeah. So I couldn't now, you know, it depends on what size of the house, but obviously, I mean, being an architect, if you build a house, it takes you a certain time. But going into detail, yes, I mean, we are engaging with all the necessary specialists, you know, we're looking at all the standards. So this takes obviously time at the beginning, but I mean, the learning curve has been extreme. We started before COVID, so that was, you know, we were maybe thinking a little bit ahead. But I mean, at this point, we're quite streamlined. But I mean, to give you a specific time, it's difficult to say. No, it depends on the size of the house.
Great, thanks, Harold. A more technical question, perhaps. What database are you and do you use for the materials that you modeled in this demonstration?
Well, we're using Revit, Autodesk Revit. This is where we can where we can basically put all the information into the model. And on the gamification, we use Unity.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, that's it.
Great, thanks, Harold. Loretta, can I hand over to you for another question?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. So, Harold, I think probably the burning question is here. This looks absolutely wonderful. All right. But how do project managers prepare themselves to be able to use this kind of technology?
Well, maybe on that one, I would like to hand over to Tristan, because he is basically the project manager in this case. If Tristan can take that one. He's our BIM specialist.
Right, so when it comes to implementation of BIM in project management, is in South Africa, we've seen that a lot of engineers and architects already use these 3D-centric tools, especially in the first 3 or 4 stages of the build process. So when it comes to design and conceptualization and the project brief, as well as the construction details and documentation, they're already doing it. But if we look at how it's being utilized, it's not being utilized to its full potential. So basically the implementation of this could be brought in when it comes to the construction phase, to collaboration, as we've shown, is one element of it. Also doing artificial analysis of models, doing automating stuff like solar calculations, insulation calculations, even cost scheduling, because you'll be able to program a lot of these costs of all the different elements into the software, and we would be able to automate stuff like that. Phasing of a project, there's a lot of tools that we did not show that is not too applicable to what we do in education, but tools that are definitely be able to be used. And then we've also had this conversation of when after project handover, being able to send a digital twin to a client where he has got all the information at his fingertips and being able to manage this project, the building in future when all of the parties have left already. So these type of things are what needs to be implemented. So looking at how project managers can work more closely with those specialists who design these models and build these models in the beginning, and then using these models to their full potential. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Harold, I think that you have answered the question, but I've got another question here that maybe just builds onto it. It said, what would be the method and cost to be to 3D scan and build a model of a typical maybe 200-meter square house using their the software? Do you have any kind of ballpark figures for us?
Not really, but I mean, we were looking into scanners because this is obviously the next step we would want to go. But I mean, then again, you know, I heard in the previous presentation, cash flow, you know, that is obviously a problem. We, like you were saying earlier, everybody loves what we do, specifically in the educational sphere. I mean, this is not local only. I mean, I've presented last year in an international roadshow. We were alongside with companies from Hong Kong. I mean, Germany, obviously, I mean, I come from Germany, as you may hear. They're quite interested, but I can only say that we are a little bit further ahead, I would say. You can do more in South Africa. You can be quicker. You can be more doing pilots. Look at 200 square meter house. I mean, it depends on the detail, but I mean, it's relatively quickly built in terms of, you know, the model. This is no problem. But I mean, the level of detail then depends. So, but I mean, we can always have a private chat on that, you know, what that would cost. But I can only say what you have seen now, that was my own house. I have done that installation without no plan. I'm a system integrator, you know, this was just a little bit of a part-time thing. And now looking at it, where you might argue, oh yeah, but for what do I need a digital twin for this house? If I show you the main DB board, this was just a small DB board, the main DB board, and I would now not be there. And it's impossible unless you spend a lot of time. Not that it's done not neat, but it's so complex. If I would now have that information, which I now have, and I can just hand it over to the new owner, this is an asset, I can tell you, which is really worth something. Because we were looking at, we're currently building a small mall in our bigger metaverse, and we had original plans, but they were completely not the way it was built. Because obviously, you know, project starts, then budget constraints, then this, but everything was done, but not the plans. So, you know, that kind of thing. I really, yeah, believe this is the way to go in future.
Wonderful. Loretta, I'm going to hand over to you for a moment. I mean, you're a project management professional. I'm not. Okay. You've kind of seen this. What any thoughts or comments or questions that you have as a project management professional that you would be of value?
From where I'm sitting, I've seen the kind of installation in controls and instrumentation. So my question is, I cannot comprehend or visualize it working anywhere else. So in any other discipline, because I work with MEIP, which is mechanical, electrical, instrumentation, piping, and civil, but I cannot see it happening in any other field or industry. So maybe if we can highlight where else is the PIM working.
No, look, I mean, currently for us, it's the whole building industry. I mean, we go into carpentry, we go into bricklaying. Our models, you can basically take a single brick out. So, and obviously for us, this is extremely important because we gamify later. So any detail we have in the model, we can obviously later use for gamifying, for gamification. But I see that in all the different disciplines. I mean, definitely. I mean, it's more in the built environment than I would now. I'm coming from a robotic automation background, so I really see it. Yeah, in future, this has been in all the different disciplines. I mean, we do lecture capacity building where we use those tools to give the lecturers practical skills. We even put them into that environment to basically look at non-compliance issues and write a COC, which you can't just do like that in, I cannot just send them into any house to train. So this is really, a tool for the future and in any discipline.
Wonderful. Harold, that was absolutely amazing. And I think I would agree with the comments that have come through. Mind-blowing is probably the way to describe it. Thank you very much to you and your team for your time. That was absolutely wonderful. And unfortunately, time does not allow us to chat more. So it is time to move on. So I'd like to move on to our next speaker, who's going to speak on managing intelligent automation in projects. And that is Johan Steyn. And he is a smart automation and artificial intelligence thought leader and management consultant. He's the chair of the Special Interest Group on Artificial Intelligence and Robotics with the IIT-PSA. And he's also a research fellow at the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking at Stellenbosch University. Not only that, he's also an adjunct professor at the School of Business, at Business School in India. And we begin, so what we're going to do is that we're going to now have a presentation and a conversation. And during Johan's presentation, he's going to be asking 3 questions on Mentimeter, which we're only going to be discussing at the end. So please, I've once again I'm popping the link to Mentimeter in the chat if you've lost it. I'm going to ask you to go on. When you actually see the slide with the Mentimeter on the top, please make sure that you are answering that question, and the questions will move through his presentation. And afterwards, we will see what your responses are in the room. Johan, over to you.
Dave, thank you so very much. Let me screen share quickly. In a sec. I know I'm in a PM event because it is super on time, so which is amazing. Well done. Let me just make sure I can get my slides presented. There we go. So hopefully you should see it full screen now. Bev, can you just confirm that? Okay, super. Thank you, everyone. 20 minutes, like a TED talk. And I saw even with Marius Westhuizen earlier, who's a close friend. I mean, and with all the speakers, there's so much content, but we have to get through the day. And again, we've got PMs making sure we do it. So that's a good thing. I want to just start off with a story. So I often get client meetings because, of the work I do in artificial intelligence and machine learning, in smart automation as well. I currently work for PwC, but I always say I don't speak on their behalf. As Bev said, I speak on behalf of the Institute of IT Professionals. This is typically a meeting that I have. A bunch of people, customers around a table, and they say, help us to use artificial intelligence. My first question is, to do what? And that's when the meeting becomes a little bit uncomfortable, because they start looking at each other and they start bringing up reasons. One of the big reasons, in my opinion, why organizations want to use AI is firstly, that technology can really help them. It is not currently as smart as a lot of us think it is. We also have a mandate from the top, a KPI, a target, where at the end of this year, you have to have 20% of your processes must be automated or AI infused. So we're just going to automate whatever we can to make sure we hit that target, and that we get our bonuses on our KPIs. And the other thing is to answer business questions or business problems. So this is where meetings typically start for me. And before we go to the first Menti question, in the last 4 years, so I've done a lot of projects in this field, but meetings that have started with, come and speak to us about artificial intelligence. In 4 years, I've only done one AI implementation that started with this conversation, because what we had to fix was people don't understand their jobs. The culture is toxic. Our processes are not automated. Our data is not in place. So I always tell customers, take a breath, step back a few steps, before you even consider this kind of technology. And this brings me to the first mentee. I've got it on my screen. I think, Bev, you might have bring it up as well. And as Bev said, we'll take it toward the end of my talk and maybe comment on that and take some questions. So in your experience, do company executives typically look for when it comes to this technology? I can't see the mentee screen here. Bev, I don't know if it's being displayed or people, I guess, can see it on the mentee app.
Behind they can see it on their phones.
Okay, super. So think about this and then use your experience, because I think almost all of the options you've got there are valid. But what is your own experience? There are many reasons why organizations might consider artificial intelligence solutions. A lot of the time, I don't even think they really understand what they're talking about. It feels that 80% of the consulting work I do is educating customers on what this technology will do to their organizations and whether they are ready or not. So the clock is ticking. Let me get into my slide. So I want to talk a little bit about automation, because I think automation, and especially intelligent or smart automation, or as Gartner says, hyper automation, will play a huge role in organizations and in how we deliver these kind of projects. I want to touch a little on this trajectory of where the technology is going, touch on ethics and philosophy. Marius also touched on that earlier, a hugely important topic. I want to end off with a bit of a clarion call to the PM community, hopefully get you guys excited, but also hopefully get a bit of a reality check, because this technology is here. It is going to change the way we work. It's going to change who we are as human beings.
Johan,
So, yes.
Can I interrupt for a sec? Won't you just share your screen again, please?
Oh, okay.
We seem to have lost you. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Let me get there quickly. Make sure I'm on the right slide. Yeah, technology. Hang on a sec.
Yeah, the joys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It should come up now.
Great, it's coming up, and you're back on track. Well done.
Thank you so much. So obviously we live in a hugely competitive environment, a globalized environment, and unless organizations work quicker, smarter, bring down their costs, become more efficient and effective, they won't survive, or they will at least not experience the growth that they want to experience. It seems to me like most organizations are to some extent becoming a technology organization or a technology-driven organization. But I think this slide to a large extent is preaching to the choir. Unless we automate smarter, unless we do things quicker, unless we serve our customers better, I don't see how organizations will survive. In the realm of automation, these days, we're actually speaking about what I call automation, or automation without human involvement. And that opens a can of worms about a very relevant topic when it comes to, will we still need the people that we have at the moment? How many job displacements will we have? You know, the other side of that lens is, can we really take the robot out of people who are, especially those doing administrative back office kind of reporting tasks? How can we get humans to do what we do good, problem solving, critical thinking and the like? And how can we get the bots or the AI to do what it does really well, which is seeing patterns and mass data sets, making decisions without our involvement and so forth. But this is no longer just a nice to have conversation. We have to automate faster, quicker, better in order to survive as a business. Most automation initiatives fail. The reasons are kind of quite broad, because I think we try and automate tasks and not end-to-end value streams. We try and automate processes that are fundamentally immature. We try and automate things that are not important to the business necessarily, because it's often not a business-led or even a people-first initiative. It's done by the automation center of excellence, or what I call some dark corner in the IT department. You know, even robotics process automation, which is very good at back office repetitive tasks. That to a large extent, and this I see with a lot of the large corporate enterprise customers I deal with locally, RPA has fundamentally failed in what it had to achieve. Again, because it's tasks driven and not value stream driven. It doesn't achieve efficiencies and effectiveness. We just do certain things faster. So it's also something I think that as project managers, we have to keep in mind, because the way we automate what we do as project managers is increasing fundamentally. And some of you might have experienced more of this than others, but make sure that we automate the right thing. make sure that we really gain those efficiencies and effectiveness, whether it's bots or not. I often say tongue in cheek, you can't automate stupidity. And I'm tempted to say that to customers so often, and I prefer rather not to, because I don't think it'll stand me very well. But people make such stupid decisions on what they want to automate and what they think is important. The other big thing is the people whose jobs will be most affected by automation, they should be a key part of the team of deciding what to automate. A quick example, I did some work for one of our big hospital groups lately. And, obviously as people walk into the hospital, that front desk staff, whether it is to come in for an operation, like a booking with a doctor or whatever, the meeting I was in was the execs, the so-called C-suite, and they were drawing all these beautiful pictures on the whiteboard about what they wanted to automate. And I said, have you actually spoken to these people who are currently doing the job, the frontline staff, the front desk staff? And they said, no, they haven't, because they are just making a financial decision, which is not irrelevant, but it's not all. We actually then went to sit down with these front desk people, and we discovered a huge amount of things that if we automate that, rather than the things that the top dogs thought we should automate, it would make a fundamental difference on the business. So that's just a highlight of why some of these initiatives fail. You cannot automate stupidity. You cannot automate just tasks. We have to achieve efficiencies and effectiveness. Now, just looking quickly at this trajectory, and again, Marius spoke about this brain-computer interface in the first session. In the past, we used to sit at our computers, desktops, or even at our laptops, in order to do work, in order to interact with a network and other colleagues and customers. These days, we are carrying in our hands technology that is smarter than most technology was just a few years ago, our mobile phones. More and more of us are using wearables, smart watches. I saw an ad for smart earrings the other day. I don't know quite how that's going to work. How is it going to pick up your heart rate and the like? But we're getting to a stage where, as human beings, our very being as Homo sapien is becoming more and more infused with technology. And we are already in the era where technology is being implanted, or the possibility exists. Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, has done this on, Marius spoke about pigs earlier, they also have done it on monkeys. If they get FDA approval, they'll start implanting these devices into human brains. It doesn't even need surgery. These devices are of the size or the width of a human hair, just a local anesthesia. Now, like with all technology, there's this double-edged sword. On the one hand, brain implants can really help people with brain injuries, with dementia and the like. But think about privacy, for instance. It's one thing if you can read what I think. Now, my thinking and my thoughts is perhaps the most private part of me. But what if you can actually influence what I think, influence what I do? So think of the societal impact of something like that. Think of the future of democracy. Now, it's no longer every person has a vote, even though that's also fundamentally flawed, I think. But this is where this technology is going. We are going to become, in the not too distant future, more and more hybrid beings. So imagine this, imagine you've got a number of people on a project and you can actually read what they're thinking in order to better manage the project. Maybe that is just ethically totally wrong. We're going to have to really debate this. Imagine that sensors, smart sensors in our bodies, if we still even need people in the near future. So it will be a really interesting debate. I said at the beginning of this talk that AI and this kind of technology is not as smart as we think it is, even though it's quite smart. But in the next few years, the trajectory of this technology will be, without expectation, it will be incredible. On the one hand, it could cause a world of opulence and of great, just a great future for our children. On the other hand, it can really cause almost an Orwellian dystopian feature. Now, talking about Orwell, if you want to read a great book, you haven't read Orwell yet, what the hell have you been doing? Orwell wrote in 1948, when he wrote the book 1984, many things. We know Thought Police, Big Brother and the like, but he said, what if the TV that I'm watching is looking back at me? That was unthinkable in those years. It was unthinkable up until a few years ago. Now, most of us have smart devices, smart televisions. You know, the TV can see that you're no longer in front of the TV. There's no movement, so it switches off. For instance, we use the camera on our TVs for gaming, but we are constantly being observed by technology. It is a fascinating thing. It's really an ethical thing, which I'll get to soon. And this is this thing, ethics and philosophy. The greatest two roles in the future when it comes to this technology is not machine learning engineers or AI experts, it is ethicists and philosophers, because we are opening a can of worms on technology that will impact who we are as human beings in a fundamental way. We can speak here about designer babies. Imagine the Nazis had this kind of technology. I mean, they already got rid of all the people who they assumed or thought of as being irrelevant or unsuitable. What if only a small portion of the world, the top rich, can actually create babies in a way that engineers in the DNA, heart disease and cancer out of those babies? What if me and my partner can go to a doctor and say we want a 6 feet 3-inch baby with blonde hair and blue eyes, without any cancer or anything like that? What's going to happen to the rest of the world? So also when we use this technology, the ethics now, we know that there's POPIA, there's privacy and the like. There's a lot of issues around the biases and our data sets. Again, we heard earlier about the facial recognition that still today struggles to recognize female faces and people of darker skin tones. It's been used for policing in the US, and we saw what happened with that. And in the last 2 years, companies like IBM and others started rolling back on this technology because it is, and again, Marius mentioned this, my way of saying it, is a bunch of white guys in Silicon Valley is just creating this technology. That's why we need teams that are ethical, that uses philosophy, but also multi-gender, multi-ethnic teams that work on these kind of technologies. The point I'm just trying to make is that we cannot underestimate how this technology will impact our future and our children's future. There's the weaponization of this technology already. There's the autonomous use of this weapon. So it's one thing if a drone says through facial recognition that I think I recognize a terrorist, and a commander or a soldier must make the decision, do we kill this person? What if the drones make those kill decisions themselves? Now humans, we sometimes miss when we shoot. The drones very rarely miss. But at least we can make decisions. What if we recognize a face of a terrorist, but he or she is walking with a small child next to them? The drone might not recognize that. We will make a different ethical decision, hopefully, even though the war in Iraq has shown us that those decisions are not ethically made. So, I can talk about this forever, but don't underestimate the philosophical and the ethical impact of this on us as humans, also on our workforce. So the way we plan these kind of initiatives, when it comes to who might lose their jobs or not, what kind of people might lose their jobs or not. In a country where every wage earner looks after 6 or 7 or more other extended family members. So to get rid of 10 people because you're automating is not 10 people, you're impacting 100 people. But on the other hand, you have to make your targets. You have to make sure that your shareholders are happy. So if you're a CEO, it's nice to talk about ethics, but to make the real important decisions, to be ethical and make sure your company keeps on surviving, you keep your job, and that you hit the numbers that your shareholders are expecting you to hit, that is a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation we have to have. So here's our first or second, I think, Mentimeter. Bev, in your experience, to think about this, do companies that you work with or work for, are they really taking these philosophical and ethical considerations into account? Is there even talk of that? And remember, not just privacy. Privacy is just scratching the surface. So they might say, are we scrambling the data to make sure that it's not personally identifiable? But when it comes to the impact on people's livelihoods, the impact on how the data might discriminate against minorities, females, etc., do these topics even pop up in your experience? So let's use just a moment or two. In your experience, have you seen this happen? Some companies might have a huge trend toward the ethical considerations. Some might not. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. Clock is ticking, 5 minutes left. So while you guys are doing that one of my last slides, this clarion call. Project managers are at the cutting edge of how this technology is being rolled out in organizations. So it's also one of the most important roles. And as technology increases in its capacity and capability and the amount of change it will it will affect in a business, the way we manage the rollout of this technology becomes even more and more important. So I want to use an example. A good friend of mine at the University of Pretoria, Dr. Catherine Malherbe, she's a breast cancer researcher, and they actually use machine learning models and scans to go into rural areas where there are very little from a medical device point of view, mammography and the like. They've actually developed a handheld scanner to do these scans. And I asked her, I said, will AI replace doctors? And her answer always sticks with me. She said, AI will never replace doctors, but AI might replace doctors who don't use AI. And that's a question I want to leave you with as a project management community. As I've said, your job will become more and more important as this technology becomes more and more powerful. Will you still have a job in a few years if you don't understand this technology? You don't have to become a super duper expert. You know how to manage, you have to know how to manage the super duper experts. You will always have a job as long as you make sure that you are familiar with this technology, the lingo that's being thrown around in a meeting or in a planning meeting. So, and on this one, we've got our last Mentimeter is, do you think smart technologies like AI will have a significant impact on what you do? Is it just hype? Will it be tremendously detrimental to you? Is there a middle ground? So I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about this. And you might, again, answer from experience. You might have already seen how AI is being impacting the way that you manage your projects. Now, that is a topic I wish I could also speak about, and a lot of you will most likely know more than me. The automation of certain tasks within project management without human involvement is already a real reality. Back to my initial slide. I've got 3 more slides and 3 minutes left before we just look at some of those Menti results and look at some questions. So remember this is now me as a consultant seeing customers. This could be you seeing a customer. This could be you in a stakeholder meeting for the client or in the company that you work at. Do not assume everyone understands this technology. You have to interrogate people's biases, really, and their presuppositions about this technology. They might want to force you to just pull a rabbit out of a hat because AI is so smart. Just AI everything. I've heard that in a few meetings. Help us to just AI everything. And then they don't even know what they're saying. Because, again, the fundamental principles, the role descriptions, how we work together, and those things don't really exist. So 2 more slides. The about me, just very briefly. And Bev, thank you for that wonderful introduction. My website that you can see there, aiforbusiness.net. I write weekly for Business Day and for some of the publications you see on there. I represent the IITPS. I would love for you to read some of the articles and send me your feedback. And then the very last slide is this one. And I guess I'm going to stop sharing, Bev, and then we're going to look at your screen, I assume. Or you're just going to kick me off sharing, which is possible these days. There we go.
There we go. Thank you so much, Johan, and thank you for that awesome presentation. I know that I'm kind of sitting here having conversations in my head, and I'm sure that everybody else is. And I'm going to ask you, please, to share your thinking in the chat as well. Shall we just have a quick look at what the answers to those questions are? We'll look at all 3, and then we'll look at some discussion. And if we've got time for a question, I might just grab 1 or 2 minutes of lunch. So the first one was, in your experience, why do company executives typically look for AI solutions? And we can see very much it's perceived as being the silver bullet, as perhaps the most compelling reason. And we need to really question that. And as project managers, what are your thoughts on that? Pop some stuff in the chat for us as you see that. And we have become, and sorry, the writing's very clear, so I'm going to go right into my screen. We have to use AI because our competitors are using it. Those 2 are the 2 key things. And can we move on to the next question, please? All right. In your experience, do companies pay sufficient attention to ethical considerations when considering smart technologies? And sometimes, but it's rare, seems to be the major thinking around that. And this is a conversation that we're going to be having a lot of after the lunch break. On to the next one, please. And do you think smart technologies like AI will have a significant impact on project management in the very near future? I think AI technology will soon be a fundamental part of project management, has been what people really, really think is going to happen. If we could stop sharing, let's jump into some Q&A in the time that we have available. Johan, thank you. That was really, really interesting. And I'd like to start with one question that came out of the chat. Is that I think in South Africa, perhaps one of the greatest fears is the fact that technology is both expensive and what is going to happen to our people. We see people being displaced. What are your thoughts on that?
Before I answer that, just to say the Mentimeter results, I fully agree with all three, and it's exactly in line with what I see in the industry. So well done, everyone. That is an exceptionally important question, especially in our country. Because of our unemployment rates, if we look at the state of our schools, for instance, how are we preparing youngsters for the future? Even the state of our tertiary educations. I often say tongue-in-cheek that we are still in the second industrial revolution, not in the fourth, because we're trying to get everyone to have electricity 24/7. That is a second industrial revolution problem, even though we're trying to get to this fourth industrial revolution. So look, industries like banking, which is very unionized and regulated, it's more difficult for those industries to just get rid of people. My worry is other industries, and even your smaller, even SMMEs, it's so easy to say, we want to automate to get rid of people. There has to be an ethical consideration too. You have star performers in your team, most likely, that rather than get rid of them, if you give them the right kind of upskilling and motivation, they could fundamentally change how your business works. And just lastly on this one, I'll use the example, if you have 100 people and through efficiencies and automation, you can have 80 people do the work of 100 people. It's true, but I then tell clients, don't you think of growing? So the other way of looking at it is to say in a year or two, I will need 150 people, but through automation and efficiencies, I keep the 100 I have now. And by enabling them and training them, getting them excited, I don't actually have to employ more people. But in our country, that is a hugely important question, which we're going to have to debate for a very long time.
Excellent thoughts there, Johan. And we've had a couple of comments in the comments thread. So we said questioning and requirement elicitation needs to be fundamental in all project management offerings, which I think is a very, very good point. And then Greg says, RPA uses structured inputs and logic, while AI uses unstructured inputs and develops its own logic, not our logic. What is your view on the future of certain business functions like project management with enhanced AI, be it AGI or SGI? Do we need to integrate it into AI? And will there be support for it? Maybe you better just explain a little bit of that alphabet soup. AGI, SGI, I'm hoping everybody knows what Greg is referring to there.
So artificial general intelligence is AGI. Currently, and again, Marius explained this earlier, we are in what we call artificial narrow intelligence. So it can, to a narrow extent, replicate some of the things that we do as humans. Artificial general intelligence, and there's a lot of debate about when we'll be there, some say 5 years, some say 50 years. That's when the AI becomes really much smarter than we are, although how smart we are is a conversation for a whiskey and philosophy. And then you'll get to an era of super intelligence, where that's really kind of the doomsday Terminator world where it just all takes over. Look, and the comment is right. RPA, I often say, is almost like a servant, almost like a young child. You tell it what to do and it will do it. And if you tell it to do the right things that RPA is made for, like processing invoices coming in or email, it can do it much more accurate than any human, faster, 24/7, doesn't go on leave, doesn't quit, and so it doesn't strike. But it is also a dumb technology because it doesn't think and it doesn't learn, where AI, well, and we see more and more AI models even in process automation, where it recognizes patterns. That's one of the things that makes it AI, not RPA. But also one of the big differentiators is AI should give you answers to questions you did not ask it yet. So you might, for instance, say, who of my customers are males under the age of 30? I mean, yeah, we can easily if our data is accurate. But it might give you a suggestion saying, since most of your customers are males under the age of 30 and this demographic in that area, perhaps this product should be sold at a 10% discount, for example. So long way of answering it, but yeah, it will fundamentally change how we manage projects. I do not see it replacing the human entirely. It is impossible. for now. We'll talk about it in 20 years. But again, we can utilize this technology to extracting requirements. A lot of that can be automated. A lot of that can be done more accurate. That's maybe one of the biggest frustrations I think that people deal with. Requirements are wrong, inaccurate, immature, and so forth. So yes, but currently general narrow intelligence, because it's not as smart yet as it could
Absolutely.
be. I hope that answers it.
I think that's great. I certainly understand those terms a lot better now, which is great. I think that's maybe the elephant in the room. The C-suite seems to act in isolation, often making decisions. They assume that they know what we need on the ground. I hear this all of the time in my practice. And maybe let's narrow it right down. And I'm going to ask everybody as we lead up to the break, if you were invited into the boardroom and asked, what do you think? All right. How do we bring those voices, the project management voice in particularly? What could we be doing to make sure we are part of the conversation?
Good question.
What do you think? What would you suggest?
Oh, are you asking me? I think
I'm asking you a question. Yeah, I'm putting you in the hot seat.
Super. No, it's good. Thank you. Look, firstly, the premise is correct. People, business leaders, executives make these decisions in their little ivory towers. They look at spreadsheets, they make financial decisions, which is relevant. But like an example I used earlier, talking to the frontline staff and so forth. So the problem I've seen over the years with especially very technical people is that they struggle to speak to business leaders in a business language they can understand. We often lead with, we're going to use Azure or AWS. And as a business leader, they think, so flippin' what? I don't care. Help me with risk management, help me with bringing down my costs, help me with being more regulated and so forth. So I think one of the things is about gaining that credibility. It's speaking to them in a language they will understand, which I think a lot of people struggle with. And but it's also navigating your career and your networks within the business to make sure that they know about you. There's most likely many other relevant answers, Bev. Those are the first things I can think of.
That's great. And I think to end off with, I think, Zweli, you've probably nailed it, is that project management must have a seat at the table. And I think that we need to ensure that the project management voice is there right from implementation, not just at the end of the process when it's time to sign off the bills. So it's been an absolutely wonderful morning, Johan. You've been an absolute star. Thank you so much. We're about to go into a lunch break now. We've got 30 minutes. We're going to come back at 1 o'clock on the dot. Sorry, I did steal 2 minutes of your lunch break, but I thought that was a very, very important question to ask. So after the break, we've got another 2 brilliant international speakers, one from the United States, one from Switzerland joining us. We're going to be talking about ethics. We're going to be talking about culture. And then we have the most amazing panel discussion for you, which I am really, really excited about. So you've got half an hour. Go and do everything that you need to get done so that you can bring your absolute focus back to the summit. Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you at 1 o'clock. And once again, sponsor videos will be playing during the break. Please do take time just to maybe have a look at those as well. Thanks, everyone.